Today, I will be breaking down yet another team. And today, we'll be breaking down the St. Louis Cardinals season and how their fantasy impact impacted us on today's action packed episode of Locked On Fantasy Baseball.
You are Locked On Fantasy Baseball, your daily fantasy baseball podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, fantasy baseball fanatics, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we are your number one source for fantasy baseball knowledge, and thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Matthew Aune. You can find me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Matthew_Aune. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the bell below to subscribe to the channel and give you a notification every time we drop a new episode. Also, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple or Spotify, wherever you may listen. It really helps out the show, and we truly appreciate it. And if you want a little bit more than what we offer on this 30-minute podcast, check us out on Subtext and become a member of the Diamond Club. We'll be able to get all our off-season content and be able to ask us questions. Links in the description below. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONMLB and get $20 off your first purchase. All right, guys, we got a great show for you today. Honestly, I'm pretty hyped. Some interesting names for fantasy. A team that, honestly, everybody expected to be better, but also a couple players we expected to pretty much take a dump, and a couple players that pretty much busted for us. So let's dig in. Let's talk about it, and let's talk about their season overall. 83 wins, 79 losses, and man, 2 years ago, you would have told me what this team would have looked like. I would have expected a little bit more. I would have expected a playoff contender, etc. Unfortunately, no. The team as a whole has just not looked what they should. They have the names that should be make them competitive, and they're not. And the fantasy value is kind of reflecting on it too, unfortunately. And the Cardinals as a whole, I think, are in for a rude awakening. Yes, they have some young studs, but at the same time, the studs really aren't coming to full hope and prayers, and that's really hurting them, truthfully. Honorable mention of Jordan Walker and company, he didn't live up to it. And I have a feeling it's going to be more and more just like that. So, let's dig in. Let's talk about one of the biggest name they have, in my opinion, at least in terms of fantasy. It's Nolan Arenado. A guy that, you would expect a lot more than what he's done over the last 2 years. And, even though last year was a pretty decent year, it wasn't a Nolan Arenado season, but it was definitely a nice resurgence since the year prior was, so fantastic, and now you expected this season didn't live up to the hype as much, and then this season is just another downward turn, and it's just not something you like to see from a guy playing at his age, going into, what we would like to say his later years at 33 years old. Wild, we're the same age, but yet I'm talking about him like he's an old man. But there's a pretty much a trend in his game that I'm not liking, and it's really just how the home run numbers pretty much have dropped, right? Like, you look at it, 2022 he had 42, 2023 he had 26, 2024 he had 16. Like, this is an ugly trend. Literally, he dropped a whole 10 runs. He played more at bats this year than he did last year. It's definitely a scary part for this dude's career. Him going into age 34, something that truly scares me. The bat speed is down, another indicator that, hey, he's definitely at his latter half and probably the uglier years of his career. And quite honestly, for next year, he's going to be a flat out, last ditch effort at a decent third baseman. And I have to do the third base rankings, but I think he's going to be outside of my top 12, truthfully. Hey, I missed out on third base. Okay, I got Nolan Arenado. He'll be able to do something for me at least. I know the power can at least see 20 home runs. It would make it an okay season, but the team as a whole, I think, is down. Ribbies are down, power's down, and runs are down, obviously, because of that. And it just ain't pretty. At least he had a decent batting average of 272, but nothing else really lit up the box score. He was pretty much a bust overall because he was still being drafted as, I think, the number 7th or 8th third baseman in the top 100, if I'm not mistaken. And everybody still thought he had another year or two in him, and it doesn't look that way. The underlying stats definitely are not supporting it. You look at it, right? Ex-WOBA 297, ex-batting average of 256, significantly less than what it actually posted. His slugs at 361. His average exit velocity is way down at 86.3 miles an hour. You go back 2 years ago, and his average exit velocity, interesting, that at 88 miles an hour, almost 89. But you would expect a little bit more from him. 86 miles an hour, still down about 2.5 miles an hour, and that's still pretty significant. He's not barreling any bit of the time. Hard hit percentage is definitely down. It's only at 31.6% of the time. Launch angle is pretty nice, but again, bat speed, and he's chasing a lot. He still just has great plate discipline with the walk to strikeouts, where he had 44 walks and 92 strikeouts. That's pretty nice, but other than that, he's really not getting the job done for you in fantasy. And this is truly disappointing. Like I said, he's going to be a full blown avoid. Now, this next guy here, Paul Goldschmidt, was not a surprise. If you were with us early in the offseason, you saw that Dom and I actually said, hey, avoid him at all costs. He's going to bust. We don't think he's going to be good. And we hit the nail right on the head. We weren't the only ones saying it. But ultimately, we kind of saw it coming. He had a little bit better of a statistical season than Arenado, only because of the home run power numbers. But, it is what it is. Like, he had 599 at bats, was at least stayed healthy. He had 70 runs, 33 doubles, a triple, 22 bombs, 65 ribs, 11 stolen bases, which is pretty nice. But the walk to strikeouts are ugly. 47 walks to 173 strikeouts. And his batting average is about 245, an OBP of 302, a slug of 414, and an OPS of 716. Like, the slug is pretty high just because of, what he was able to do in the doubles category. But, I'm still not really a really big fan of what he's done, other than this is a points league. You're not too disappointed. But, what he cost too, even though he was in the lower in the drafts, he was still a top 10 first baseman and was going higher than guys like Vinny Pasquantino, even though he didn't finish the season. I'd rather take an empty bench spot than what Paul Goldschmidt was doing, truthfully. So, if you waited, you got like the Vinny P's and things like that. You definitely were happier with their production after the first month than Paul Goldschmidt's in a totalitarian season, I guess. I'm really scared of him entirely for fantasy next year. I don't think I'm going to be drafting or having a share of him at all, if I'm really being honest. Like, Paul Goldschmidt is literally undraftable for me at this point, just based off of the fact that we're seeing a serious decrease in all of his his stats and just in his production. But I mean, Father Time is unbeaten. I hate that we're seeing this to Arenado and Goldschmidt at the same time. Essentially, sorry about that. At the same time, but the bat speed hasn't increased at all. It's only it's sitting at a 61 grade, 72.5. And you know what? This was something we were scared about. And he even went to Driveline this offseason to try and improve it. And it didn't do anything for it. Man, it's just disappointing. When you hit 36 years old, going to be 37 next year, I believe, right? He didn't just turn it. Yeah, he just turned 37. So he's going to have a age 37 season. Yeah, I'm not foreseeing a good season out of him. I think he's going to be a full-blown avoid. So hopefully, the whole community as a whole has kind of caught up to that and, isn't vying for him to be a top 12 first baseman. I think he's going to be well outside that for me. Probably more like 18 or 19, honestly, not to, essentially, throw shade on the dude or say he's really he's too far gone. But for fantasy, he is too far gone. There's way better options at that point. I will not be touching him in 2025 whatsoever. Coming up next, we're going to find out what my opinion is on Jordan Walker and, is the second half of the season what we really expected after, a very disappointing first 2 years, essentially, of Jordan Walker? Is Nolan Gorman going to be somebody that we're going to be counting on next year for that? We'll find out that more coming up next. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace for the MLB, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on GameTime app actually go down as you get closer to the first pitch. With killer deals and killer last-minute deals, all-in-one prices, views from your seat, and lowest prices guaranteed, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets for MLB games. Last-minute ticket deals save up to 60% on buying last-minute sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Flash deals save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Zone deals save even more when you choose a section like GameTime choose the seat for you. All-in-one pricing, toggle through this feature and show the upfront total cost with no surprises at checkout, so you don't have to cancel in because the prices went up astronomically. views from your seat. So get a panoramic view that you can move around and look to see. Make sure you're not sitting behind that pole. Lowest prices guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets this with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and create an account. Use the code Locked On MLB to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all day? Have you had to turn down the volume with all that chatting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or free on the Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On podcast, your team every day. Introducing the Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast, Diamond Club on Subtext, your ultimate fantasy baseball companion. Join us this offseason. Get our rankings, redraft, dynasty, prospect, etc., sleepers, breakout, busts, ask us questions, keepers, trades, etc. All that wonderful stuff you can't really get in this 30-minute podcast, and it's there for you for a minimal cost. The link's in the description below, and by joining, you get a free 2 weeks. We're giving all this wonderful stuff, so check us out. All right, let's get back into it. Let's start talking some baseball again. And like I promised right before the break, we're going to be talking about Mr. Jordan Walker. Walker has been, in my opinion, somebody that's been quite disappointing as a prospect. Somebody I had some high hopes for going in 2 years ago. It's crazy. He's still only 22, so maybe it just takes a little bit of time. But you look at it and you go, oh, man, like, dude, what is happening, right? Like, you look at his prospect numbers, going in like 22, right? 461 at bats, 100 runs, 31 doubles, 3 triples, 19 bombs, 68 ribs, 22 stolen bases, 58 walks, 116 strikeouts, batting .306, an OBP of 388, a slug of 510, and an OPS of 898. Like, those are fantastic numbers. That's like, yeah, this kid's going to be good when he hits the bigs. Wrong. First shot at the bigs, 420 at bats. He breaks camp, 51 runs, 19 doubles, 2 triples, 16 bombs, 51 ribs, 7 stolen bases, and, walked 104 times to 37 strikeouts, 37 walks. Wow, look at me. Batted .276 was a pretty decent number, but other than that, it was kind of like, meh, kind of missed season, and honestly, not anywhere near what you thought he was going to do. And even this year, you look at it and you go, okay, what really happened with this kid, right? Like, I had him ranked pretty high because he was able to get the resurgence once he got the call back up after being sent down in 2023. But then you're just like, okay, so maybe we're going to see it this year. Maybe this is the year he has a full season. It's going to be fantastic. But no, he starts off the season really outright bust. Only got about 18 games started and made about 58 at bats and was absolutely atrocious. Batted about a 155. Just really didn't look good. Then the second half, he comes back, and again, kind of the same story, but not really. He managed to play about 29 games. He had about 106 at bats. He had 12 runs. He had 6 doubles, 5 bombs, 16 ribs, a stolen base. Batted .226. An OBP of 261, a slug of 425, an OPS of 686. I'm not really impressed when it comes to him. He was performing down the stretch here and there. And you look at like the breakdown. What he did in September was kind of enticing a little bit. He had 5 home runs that month. He batted about 253. He had 16 ribs, a stolen base, to boot with, 12 runs. But like, that isn't enough to deem this kid. So how I'm treating Jordan Walker in 2025 is essentially this, right? You gotta take a step back. Can't look at the prospect pedigree. Well, you can, but you got to take it with a grain of salt. And you got to just say, okay, if he's there and it's the right time to pick him, I'll do it. So, like, I'm hoping he's kind of more like a lottery pick. I don't know what ADP is going to have him. I don't know how excited people are going to be coming off the end of the year where, he was kind of okay and kind of serviceable. But going into this year, people drafted him as like their OF2-3. I'm a victim. I fell a victim for sure. Figured, it's, sophomore year, honestly, first rookie year would truly, be that step forward, but it wasn't, unfortunately. So with Jordan Walker this year, if he comes at a discount where he's like your first bench spot after filling your whole batting lineup down to UTs, then I'm okay with picking him. His price is not right, not high enough, and he's not having the spring training campaign to support the pick. I'm truthfully going to avoid him at all costs as well. This team does not have many fantasy assets that I'm truly interested in, if I'm really being honest. But Jordan Walker would be one of the few. And again, it has to be at the right price. Otherwise, I am paying that premium because I don't think he's worth the premium at this point. I need to see it first. And I'd rather it be on somebody else's team than on mine. God forbid he flops. But all right, we're going to move on. Let's talk about Nolan Gorman. Gorman is somebody I liked coming into this season, truthfully. I really thought he was going to have a better year statistically, truthfully. Like, I mean, batting average, you're not going to really count on with him. You pretty much you get what you get, where he just loves to strike out and not really walk. But he has power and things like that. And I figured, okay, we would have saw that, but it didn't even come anywhere relatively close if you really look at it. Like he had what 30, 40 less at bats, and he had 8 less home runs. You would have told me 3, 4, sure, but 8, that's a big difference. On top of that, the runs and ribbies were significantly down, which the team as a whole was not good for that situation, but it was down significantly. Where 23 had 59 runs, he had 42 this year. He had 76 runs, RBIs the year before. He had 50. Like, this is not great. And then on top of that, you're putting out that 203 batting average. Like, it's not somebody you really want as a fantasy asset on your team. He's only 24 years old. Like that's the one part I do like. And, you know, he will be 25 next year when, after the first month of baseball. His birthday's in May. But that's still young, still coming into prime. But like, you got to look at it like, okay, he's not going to be somebody that you're going to want to count on as a starter. He's somebody you're going to draft again to see what that upside is going to be, because there is upside, and see how he's just going to perform. But he's not somebody you're going to want to rely on, because then you're going to pretty much set yourself up for failure. Like, there's certain times where you want to be risky, right? Like, going back to our breakout podcast, breakout episode yesterday, and saying, okay, which one of these guys am I willing to pay the high price for? Because the ceiling is super high, and the pick almost feels worth it. None of these guys scream, I want to pick you in the top 100. Like, I'm not doing that for Nolan Gorman. I'm not going to even walk out of the draft with him as like my starter at any position, or at second or third. Like, no, I'm good. Like, he does not have that contention for me, or I do not perceive him as that kind of player for me. We're just going to avoid him at all costs too. Like, I don't think he's going to be a valuable fantasy asset unless he can turn it around. If he was batting like 240, 250 and putting up like 30, 35 home runs, and the runs and ribbies were there, this would be a completely different conversation. But it's not. He didn't even crack 20 this past year and didn't miss that much time. So Nolan Gorman's an out for me. I'm not trying to take him. I'm not trying to touch him anywhere. I'm sorry this episode is just so negative, but the team as a whole needs to turn it around, truthfully. So I'm disappointed. We're just gonna keep going here. Coming up next, we got some good names. Wilson Contreras, we break down his season. Lars Nootbaar, is he actually worth, drafting next year, or just, waiting till he gets hurt and then picking him off the waiver wire? Sonny Gray, what a fantastic season from him. And is Helsley able to repeat? That's all coming up next. All right. With FanDuel, when it comes to a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play from play, and view live play-by-play and so much more at the same cage where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's on FanDuel.com. And guys, you got to make that $5 bet count, right? You don't want to just like, okay, here's $5 so I can get 20. No, you want to win and you want to get to $200, right? So let's do this, right? I'm a Giant fan. I'll say it every single time, but I'm going to poo-poo all over them. Let's place a bet, against them at all times. Because, they're not going to win too many games. So fair shot. Then we're going to parlay it with, the under on Daniel Jones, so go as low as you humanly can. Malik Neighbors is the only viable, option for fantasy, for any kind of production. So, do the over on targets, receptions, and, receiving yards, because he gets about like 20 targets a game, which is absolutely fantastic. And then he should be able to put up the numbers with that volume. And then, it's interesting. I'm going to take the over always on Tracy's, rushing yards right now, because they're still projecting him to be lower because he's still behind Singletary. But I think Tracy's about to steal that job. So throwing that little bet on him, and he might actually hit and boost up that parlay. So check us out, FanDuel.com. You bet $5, you get $200 guaranteed. All right, we're in this latter half of the show. We don't have many names left, but I want to talk about Wilson Contreras. And you know, Wilson is somebody that was okay for this season, in my opinion. Didn't really get the at bats because he was hurt quite a bit this year, but still managed to be pretty valuable with his 301 at bats, 48 runs, 17 doubles, 15 bombs, 36 ribs, 4 stolen bases, batted 262, a 380 OBP, a slug of 468, and an OPS of 848. So like we drafted him pretty decently high, unfortunately, and he just obviously wasn't, you know, by high for a catcher. But we weren't able to get the production we wanted out of him, but he was definitely one of the better picks once he started getting going. And that pace is significantly better than the previous year where you were really happy to get him, which kind of made his price be where it was, especially for a catcher. But like through 301 at bats, he already had 15 home runs. You literally double that, or you take away 50 at bats. It's like a 27 to 30 home run pace. You can double the runs and ribs at that point, which would be fantastic season because he's able to just produce. And then the 262 batting average, keep that stagnant or even lower to 250. And that's phenomenal production out of your catcher position. So I'm not mad at his season at all. I just hope that he can kind of stay healthy. And that'll be the true difference maker. But the thing is, he's going into his age 33 season himself, I believe. Right? Yeah. Yeah, because he turns 33 in May. And, you know, what are we really getting from him? Is the injuries just indicative of how he's going to be for the rest of his career? We're going to just have ups and downs in terms of, okay, when he's healthy, he's a good catcher and he's going to produce for fantasy. And when he's not, he's just going to kill you and you got to pick somebody else up and clog up an IL spot. This is the stuff that we're going to have to consider when drafting Wilson Contreras next year. So, like, I'm looking at it like this. I'm probably going to try and avoid him entirely, unless he's there as a value later in the draft. I feel like this is the theme for St. Louis. This whole team is just I'm not touching unless they're out there for a value, essentially. Except for like maybe one or two guys. So Wilson Contreras, just a hot avoid in all honesty. Yeah, let's keep it moving. Let's talk about Lars Nootbaar. Nootbaar again, a guy that just can't stay on the field. It's kind of depressing. I like Nootbaar, I like the talent, but I was able to get to like 109 games, which can kill you. And he was coming back from injury twice through this season. 348 at bats, 39 runs, 18 doubles, 3 triples, 12 homers, 45 ribs, 7 stolen bases, and batted 244. The pace is nice. You would have gave him like, I don't know, 250 more at bats. Probably would have saw about like 22 home runs, which would have been nice. Stolen bases could have got 14. Batting average, I think he would have gotten up to 255. But the counting stats and stuff, again, just wouldn't be there because of the team as a whole. It just no Lars Nootbaar, I don't think is a viable fantasy asset either next year. I'll take the upside, but he's going to be one of the later picks for me if he's even available around there. I think people are still going to be caught up on the name and what he did for them in that short period of time. And he's just going to be a bust for fantasy no matter where you pick him because he's going to end up on your waiver wire and then you just stream him as it goes. Because when he's hot, he's hot. He's fantastic. He's contributing. But when he's cold. Or when he's hurt, he ain't doing nothing for you. And that's the problem. He's also not a guy I'm going to want to stash on my IL. So he's not really worth the pick for me. So, when I can stream him, I will. But I'm not picking this dude anywhere relatively close to that. So just avoid him at all times if you have to. Let's move on. Let's talk about Sonny Gray. Bright spot of this lineup, truthfully. He had a great year, if I remember correctly, and he did. He 166 innings pitched, a 3.84 ERA, a little bit higher side, but still 203 strikeouts and a WHIP of 108. Like fantastic season. ERA, like I said, a little high. Honestly, his highest ERA since 2021. But hey, I'll take the strikeout numbers. The strikeout numbers are fantastic, and it wasn't all bad. It was just he got lit up at times in which super inflated his ERA. I don't think he's done at age 34 going into age 35. Obviously, he comes with some risk being 34 years old, but going into 35. But you know what? This is what you do. I mean, honestly, you look at certain pitchers and you just go, okay, it is what it is. Like they just got it until the day they pretty much just say, okay, I'm retired, I'm done, because that's just what they do. And Sonny Gray is one of those guys. He's just been good his whole career, and I've just enjoyed watching him. He's had one truly bad season, in my opinion. Well, two, but 2016 really don't count for me because it was so long ago. But you look at, and he's had such a good career that you just go, okay, cool, man. Like I appreciate you. I'm gonna trust you. I'm gonna ride or die with you pretty much to the end. We drafted him. I just don't know where. He's unfortunately going to cost a lot, and that's going to be the biggest deciding factor of do you want to start off your season with him as your SB2-3, or take one of these younger guys that are a little bit more sexier with a little bit more upside, with less of a chance of getting hurt because of father time is on their side, not theirs, not his. And that's just, ultimately how you got to face this decision going down in the stretch. So yeah, Sonny Gray for me. I'm going to be drafting. It's just a matter of value and price. All right. Our last guy here, Ryan Helsley. Uh, you know, his 2023 campaign was kind of depressing for me. You know, I didn't expect the 2024 campaign to be as nice. You look at what am I saying? I'm thinking of somebody else entirely. I apologize. Ryan Helsley has had two solid years, and I take that back. He has been even better this year. These saves were absolutely fantastic at 49. Oh, and that's why I said it. 2023 he only managed to walk away with 14, even though the ERA was nice at a 2.45. The and the strikeouts were, you know, good, but not overwhelming like this year. So, like, let's look at it, right? He had 49 this year. He had 66 innings. He had 79 strikeouts. He had a 2.04 ERA with a 1.10 whip. That's really where the key was. That's where, like, okay, that's a big difference. Like, he at least was getting the saves this year, and how they were going to win games was going to be close, obviously, because that's just the makeup of the team, unfortunately. So with Helsley, you got to look at it like this, and you got to say, okay, boom, you know, he has the upside of getting all these saves, but how repeatable is this season? I don't know about repeatable. Like, I don't foresee him getting obviously 49 saves. I see him more like 30, 35, which is still great. An RP one at that point, but lower end. And until they get better, I don't foresee him being able to do that again. I think it was an outlier year, and I think that you know we'll just have to take it with a grain of salt. Now, unless we see some great offseason movement. I'm not going to have him ranked as a top 5 closer. Again, probably like 10 or 12, things like that, where I think Helsley is probably more better suited and probably a better draft price at that point. You know, that's really just about it for me with this team. Ultimately, like, for me with this team, looking at it, I look at them like this. These guys don't overwhelm me or excite me to draft any of them except for Sonny Gray and Helsley in 2025. All these guys are essentially, if the value is right, I will pick them. Other than that, I'm moving on. You guys want to pick them higher. I promise you're not going to have a good time this season in fantasy baseball. It's gonna you French ride instead of pizza, and you ended up going off the hill. So just be wise. Even if you are a St. Louis fan, don't be a homer when it comes to your picks, because it's gonna end up biting you in the butt. But guys, please like, subscribe, comment, rate, review, and check us out and all that stuff. And when you're done checking us out, check out our boy Sully over at Lockdown MLB. Give me that playoff coverage. Let's go Yanks, and have a great rest of your day, guys. Peace.